At a family dinner, my foster parents bragged about making me a rich doctor, so I exposed the truth of how they actually stole from me and made my life hell. My parents were both killed in a hit-and-run car accident when I was just 10 years old. My dad was at the time 40 and my mom was 36. Neither of them had relatives who could take me in. We lived in a really small, church-going town where everyone knew one another. My dad had been the heir to a small fortune and so he never really had to work. He didn't like the big city, so he and my mom decided to move to a small town where he could have an antique store. My mom was into collecting antiques, so this was a good idea for them. I would have had to go the orphanage route when they died, but this couple from the church, who I will call Mr. and Mrs. Jones, made this big to-do in church about how a little girl needs a loving home, and God has given us this joyous task of bringing her up in our home and hearts. It's been a long time and I don't remember if those were Mrs. Jones's exact words, but they did say something cringe-worthy like that. So in the end, Mr. and Mrs. Jones ended up becoming my foster parents. The Jones had their own daughter Lily, who was a year older than me. That should have meant we would be super good friends, but Lily had her own thing going and practically ignored me. I can write countless stories of how Lisa manipulated everyone around her and would blame me for random things. To give you an example, one day, she once stole a lapel pin that belonged to her father as she liked shiny things. She would wear it secretly in school and I knew about it. Mr. Jones soon discovered that the lapel pin was missing and turned the house upside down looking for it as it belonged to his father and he really loved it. They found the pin in Lily's room where Lily, instead of admitting the truth, acted like she was shocked and started blaming me for the pin. I was dumbfounded by her accusations and denied them vehemently, but she convinced the Jones that it was in fact me who had stolen the ring and hid it in her room to hide my crime and blame her instead. This is just one of the many, many times when Lily would get away while we were growing up by blaming me so I would get punished or grounded instead of her. The Jones received a stipend from the state to take care of me, but they also received checks every month from my dad's estate, which was supposed to take care of me until I was 18. When I did turn 18, I would receive full control of my inheritance. The Jones weren't exactly cruel to me, but in private it was clear they were just using me to build up their reputation in town. In front of other people, they would fawn over me in a sick, cotton candy fashion that made me uncomfortable. They would also make Lily be nice to me in public, which she absolutely resented but went along with it. The Jones would also put on a big show whenever social workers came to check up on me. They would coach me before the lady would come, and tell me to praise how godly and wonderful they were. After the social worker left, they would go right back to ignoring me and spending my dad's money on crap on the internet or on their trips. It was clear to me even as a teen that the Jones were using only some of my endowment, both from the state and from my trust, to take care of me. The rest, they would spend it on themselves. As I grew older I could see that my Jones parents would pretend as though they had great business acumen and that's why they had more money and could buy a new Volvo. Where I'm from, a new Volvo is an event, and take a trip to New York and buy fancy clothes for Lily. When I was 17 I noticed that my Jones parents were stockpiling away my trust fund money to pay for Lily's tuition to college. Throughout this time, the Jones would never outright say so, but would heavily imply that I owed them and that once I got control of my inheritance, I should be godly and generous and give them some material compensation for all the work they did to raise me. I think they already got lots of material, especially since Mrs. Jones practically stole all of my mom's antiques from my parents' store and kept them for herself, gave some to Lily, or to her other relatives. One thing my mom never kept at her store was an extremely expensive, Baroque-era fine china set, absolutely complete and worth tens of thousands of dollars. Not a replica, but the real deal. So real, Napoleon Bonaparte himself might well have eaten a steak off those plates. Probably not, but you get the point. It was my china set of course, but Mrs. Jones thought I was an idiot and didn't know that. She would always talk about how this china set will go to Lily on her wedding day. Mrs. Jones assumed that since I always dressed like a tomboy, didn't care about all my mom's antiques that Mrs. Jones had stolen or given away, and I also wouldn't care about the china set. When I was a kid, my mom told me that things were things, and not to obsess over them. So, having the china set for myself wasn't an issue. What was an issue was Mrs. Jones acting like it was hers to give away. So, once Lily went off to college, thanks to my biological mom and dad's money, I had to make my own plans. I had always done well in school and had actually gotten a partial scholarship to attend school out of state. The rest, I could easily pay for with my inheritance, which I would very soon have control of once I turned 18. Per usual, Mr. and Mrs. Jones were haranguing me about how I owe them compensation and since I was going to be rich soon I ought to share the wealth with them. I never promised them anything or argued whenever they talked like this. I just smiled and kept a tally of every single bank statement, I got them quarterly, that my trust issued over the years. The Jones family never shared them with me of course, but when I asked the bank for a yearly rundown, they were more than happy to oblige. I figured that over the past 7 years, they probably stole or misappropriated more than $200,000 of my parents' money, to say nothing of the state money they misused. I think they had more than shared my wealth. I also wrote down every single major purchase my Jones parents clearly made over the past 7 years with money that was clearly beyond their means as a housewife and an insurance salesman. Things such as a $50,000 car for cash, a used $18,000 car for cash that they gave to Lily, trips to Hawaii and New York, and cash gifts to the church that made them look super generous at my deceased parents' expense. I kept it all in a nice, 3-ring binder. I started arranging my travel to my new campus so I could officially move out. I didn't have much stuff at the Joneses' house anyway, and had zero intention of coming back, not unless they apologized. The Jones knew I was leaving but didn't bother seeing me off, because they assumed I would come back to give them their due. I waited for our church's yearly antique sale extravaganza, set to begin in 3 days. Per usual, the Jones donated all sorts of random stuff, many of it knickknacks that used to belong to my parents and technically belonged to me. They weren't shy about giving away my stuff and taking credit for it. While Mr. and Mrs. Jones were on one of their shopping sprees with my parents' money and away from their house, I boxed up the china set that belonged to my mother and took it with me to college. On the way to college, I stopped at an antique store that I had researched about. I knew the good people here would appreciate it and give me a fair price for the set's value. Thankfully, they did, and I asked them to transfer the money to my bank account, which could only be accessed by me. As expected, my Jones mom went ballistic when she found her china set missing. She called me flabbergasted and I informed her how I had sold them. She started yelling at me that I had no right to do that and it should have gone to Lily. I told her that it belonged to my mother and she left it for me, so why would Lily deserve to have it? Mrs. Jones began shouting how ungrateful I was and how selfish I was for selling it when they had spent all these years raising me. I laughed hearing her words and told her that she would be hearing from my lawyer very soon. She started asking me what I meant by that, but I cut the call knowing that she and Mr. Jones were going to receive a big surprise soon. You see, I had met up with the lawyer who handled my parents' wills and we had discussed everything that my Jones parents had taken from me over the years, which was quite illegal. A week later, my Jones parents received a package by registered mail from me and my attorney. It contained my binder where I showed my bank statements and also a list of all their spending extravagances. It also contained a warning from my attorney that should they ever try to contact me again for money, they will receive a bill and a court date. That was that. Since then, Lily and the Jones family never reached out in 7 years, and I've intentionally kept it that way. About 6 months ago, Lily unexpectedly contacted me on Facebook. I remember blocking her, but it seems she made a new account. She shared that she's now married and expecting her first child, expressing thoughts about how she has been thinking about family. Lily admitted regret for not treating me better, acknowledging the absence of siblings in her life, and expressing a desire to share this journey with me. She apologized for the years of neglect and hardships she caused me, assuring me that her current outreach wasn't motivated by money but by genuine remorse as she found herself in a better place. It felt good to see that she understood her actions and truly apologized. I hesitatingly replied back to her, acknowledging her message and expressing my initial reservations. However, over time, our conversations evolved. Slowly, we started sharing bits and pieces of our lives. I told her about my journey through medical school and the challenges I faced to become a doctor. Surprisingly, Lily opened up about her pregnancy, sharing the joys and anxieties of impending motherhood, and spoke about her married life. As the weeks turned into months, our exchanges deepened. We spoke about our respective pasts, bridging the gap that had once seemed insurmountable.